My name is Dr. Peter Haar, and I met most of you when we did our cadaver CT imaging. I'd like to make this video now to show you a couple things. First, I want to show you how you can log on to access your CT images. Then I want to talk a little bit about CT imaging just to get you oriented, and I want to show you this web-based software we're going to be using to interact with your images and show you some of the techniques you can use to get the most out of your images. The software that you're going to be using to look at your cadaver CT images is called Citrix ShareFile. Right around the start of your gross anatomy course, you're going to get an email that looks just like this. What you're going to do is click on this link, and it's going to ask you to create a password. Then you're going to enter the password. You'll be able to open a folder corresponding to your cadaver, and then you're going to click on a black square icon to start viewing your images. When you click on that link, you'll be taken to a login screen that looks like this. It should have your name and VCU School of Medicine. Click Continue. Then it's going to ask you to enter a password. So enter a password, and be sure to write it down. And save and sign in. Then you'll be taken to this screen that has a list of all the cadavers in your entire class. This is great because if you have a classmate who has a particularly interesting finding on their cadaver CT images, you have access to those too. So suppose you're in table number 25. Scroll down until you see the folder that corresponds to your table, and click on the folder. And now to access your images, just click on this black square icon. That will launch this image viewer. You'll see your images loading here in the upper right hand corner. Give that a minute to load. And while that's loading, let's talk just a little bit about CT imaging. On CT images and on really all medical imaging, the convention is that the image looks as if you're looking at an actual patient. So the right hand side of the image is the patient's left side of the body. It's as if the patient is standing here looking at us. This marker up here, this letter R, stands for right, and it indicates on the image that this is the right side of the patient's body. On axial images, this is an axial MRI of a brain. This is the right side of the patient, and this is the left side, and that's simply the convention all the time in medical imaging. And this is important to know. For example, suppose you had a question on a test that said, show me or point to the patient's left humerus. Where would it be? Over here is the left humerus. When we scanned your cadavers, we talked a little bit about the difference between a projectional image and a cross-sectional image. CT is a type of cross-sectional imaging, and radiographs or X-rays are a type of projectional imaging. In a projectional image, we use an X-ray beam shined on a sensor or a plate, and tissue that is not very dense, such as air, appears dark, and tissue that is very dense, such as bone, appears bright. Cross-sectional imaging, it's as if we're examining just one single slice of tissue at a time, and you can imagine that sort of like a slice of a loaf of bread. And when we look at a CT image, we're only considering the tissue and the information that is on one single slice at a time. When we CT scanned your cadavers, we went from head to toe using axial images, which is this plane right here, the axial plane. We are going to also examine images in the sagittal plane, which is this plane right here, and also the coronal plane, which is this plane right here. It's important for you to know which orientation each of these planes is: axial, sagittal, and coronal. And as we scanned your cadavers, we also talked about the differences in different densities of tissue and how different densities would correspond to different levels of grayscale brightness on your images. On both CT and radiography, denser tissue appears brighter, and less dense tissue appears darker. The least dense material or substance on your images is going to be air or gas within the body, and that's going to usually appear black. The most dense material we talked about that we probably are ever going to see in your cadaver is metal, and that's going to be completely white, and in some cases it's so dense that it causes artifact that looks like sort of a starburst shooting out from the sides of a metal implant, for example. Next dense would be cortical bone, medullary bone. Tendon and ligament are going to be denser than muscle. Solid organs then are going to be slightly more dense than just water. And fat is going to be the least dense tissue that we see. Fat is going to be darker in grayscale than water is. If you think about like salad dressing, for example, the olive oil, which is fat density, is going to float on top of the vinegar, which is water density. When you first open your images, by default, ShareFile is going to show you your axial images. Up here in the upper left-hand corner, there's some text information that isn't very important for us. It's just going to let you know that you happen to be looking at your own cadaver, if, in this case, if you happen to be cadaver table number 25. Down here is the series list. Series 3 corresponds to the axial images, Series 4 the coronal images, and Series 5 the sagittal images. We'll look at these at both in a second, but for now, if you want a little more screen real estate, you can click on this arrow and that will shut this pane and just let you have a little more room to look at your images. To scroll your images, you can use the scroll wheel on your mouse. You can use the left or right arrow keys to do the same thing, or you can click on the slider at the bottom of the image, click it and drag it, and that will let you scroll back and forth. Notice as I do this, in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a number. This number is a useful piece of information. A lot of times in medicine, we talk to other physicians on the phone, and to make sure we're all on the same page, we'll often say something like, you know, on image 94, there is a 3 centimeter left pulmonary nodule. Or your anatomy consultant may write in the report, look on image 200 of the axial series, and you can click this and drag it so you're on image 200 here. And there's a right inguinal hernia containing fat and bowel. Another useful button is this drag and zoom tool. So click on this, and this will let you click and drag to pan the image around. By clicking this magnifying glass, you can zoom in. This demagnifying glass, you can zoom out. And the keys A as in apple and Z as in zebra do the same things. So you can zoom in, zoom out, pan around, scroll up and down, and see a lot of different detail by navigating around that way. Let's talk next about this button up here that says WW/WL. It stands for window width and window level, which you can think of sort of like the contrast and intensity knobs on a computer monitor. So if I click this, you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner, it tells me that WW/WL, window width and window level, is 450/50, which corresponds to soft tissue windows. And let's talk about windowing right now a little bit. CT images have such a wide range of pixel value that we have to do what's called re-windowing to get the most out of our images. We're going to change what's called the window width and window level to visualize different types of tissues on our images. When you open ShareFile, the default window will be soft tissues, which is a window width and window level of 450/50. I'll show you in just a second how we can visualize bone a little bit better, and that would be a window of about 1400/400, and also lung windows, which are about 1400/-400. These are good numbers, especially bone, and lung to jot down, because we're going to be using these later, and your radiology consultant in the reports might refer to a window width and window level that's different from the default of 450/50. And here we are back on the images. I'm going to click on this window width, window level tool, and notice this is 450/50. I'm going to go to look at bone detail, and I'm going to go to about 1400/400. So here's 1400/400, about like that. Now, as I scroll through this, notice how I don't see the soft tissues quite as well, but I see so much more detail in the bones, right? I don't see any detail at all in the lungs. So I'm going to switch now to lung windows, which we said was 1400/-400, and I can click on the image and just drag it straight down until I get to -400. Here's about 1400/-400, and now all of a sudden I see much more detail in the lung parenchyma. I can re-window this a little bit, and you can do this to what looks the best to your eye. And we see there are lung masses throughout both lungs. If you get way off course, like down here, remember you can just click this back arrow, and it will return you to the default soft tissue windows 450/50. So don't be afraid to to experiment with this. And now the last thing I can show you will be how to open up the coronal and sagittal image series of your cadaver study. So you can click on this arrow to reopen this pane, and it's very simple. Just click this series 4 to open your coronal images. I'll click that, and it'll take it a minute to load. Now, same thing, you can click the slider to drag the images, and we'll click on the drag and zoom tool to pan the image around. I'll click the letter A to zoom in, pan, and we can re-window over here. Now, there's something a little more advanced that I want to show you that may be helpful to you. If you click this little icon here, it'll put the view in double pane mode, or a split screen mode here. So I'll click on that, and then I'll open the sagittal images. Give that a minute to load. And now I can look at both the coronal and sagittal images at the same time. If I drag this slider, you'll notice that a line sweeps across the coronal images, and this line indicates the level that this sagittal image is. So here is the sagittal image in about midline, and we notice a line going right down the midline of this coronal image. I can click on the coronal images now, and I will see a line over here on the sagittal images. So as I scroll the coronal images back and forth, I can tell what level I'm looking at over here. So this is very helpful for looking at very complex structures or things where you're often not exactly sure what level you are. Okay, I think that's enough to get you started. You can log on and start looking at your own images, and I'll be seeing you shortly in some workshops, and we'll also have some more videos for you. See you soon.